You'll never hear him coming. There'll be no clatter of hooves, no rattle of reins, only the wind whistling through the eaves, drawing tight across your windows, only the breath catching in your chest, and then the soft chime of bells just as the coach arrives. The Dullahan is known today as one of the most chilling figures in all of Irish folklore. A headless rider on a black horse, or else the driver of a ghastly spectral coach known as the Cóiste Bodhar, the silent coach, or sometimes the deaf coach, rumbling through the night, making no sound, giving no warning to those it is sent to collect. Today, our idea of the Dullahan comes from the very clear description given in the folkloric poem The Death Coach, which appears in Thomas Crofton Croker's Fairy Legends and Traditions of the South of Ireland. In this poem, it's depicted as a terrifying headless driver of a supernatural vehicle hurtling through the darkened Irish countryside. As the poem unfolds, its horror becomes clear. This is no ordinary carriage, but a grim, black vessel of bone and fire, stitched together from the remnants of the dead. Wheel spokes made of thigh bones, axles of human spine, lanterns glowing in hollowed skulls. In the most modern tellings, its driver lashes at the horses with a whip made from flesh and sinew. The coach itself moves without a sound. And that is the true horror of it. There's no warning, no galloping hooves to wake the house, no rattle of approach, only the sudden realization that something has already arrived. Inside the coach sit his passengers, the silent dead, bound for whatever strange fate awaits them beyond the veil. And if you ever do hear its only noise, the soft chime of tinkling bells, or sense that heavy presence beyond your door, know this: when the Dullahan's coach arrives, it is not a visitor. It is a summons. Your time has come. There is no protest, no plea, no final breath. It's time to go, and that is that. At least that's how we imagine him now in the modern day. The soul collector, the harbinger, the headless reaper without a scythe. But was the Dullahan always viewed like this? Or has something older and stranger been folded into his myth? One of the best resources for Dullahan myths is Crofton Croker's Fairy Legends and Traditions of the South of Ireland. In this collection there are 4 tales under the heading Dullahan, and, curiously, only 2 of them ever use the term. The other 2 speak of something that certainly looks similar in the outset, something silent, something spectral, but also possibly separate. One such tale is called Hanlon's Mill. It's an uncanny tale in which death comes quietly and suddenly, but that also raises more questions than it answers.
Mick arrived one morning at the master's house to find him standing at the yard gate, his boots still wet with dew from an early walk around his grounds. The master was a sharp-eyed, silver-haired sort, known for his horses, for his hospitality, and for his belief in nothing he couldn't see. He greeted Mick warmly and told him that he had an important job for him today. "I need you to take the cart across the Inch," he said, handing Mick the reins. Fetch the iron latch I ordered from Connolly's, the big one for barn gate, and don't dally. Storm's coming. The Inch were a stretch of open land between the river and the hill. A flat, mist-drenched causeway where somehow the sky felt closer than the earth. It had a bit of a reputation for odd goings-on. Folk said it wasn't really a place, but a crossing, somewhere neither here nor there. A thin kind of place where things passed through on their way to somewhere else. But Mick were not the fanciful sort, and so he set off without a worry in the world. His path took him along the low road that passed the broken shell of Hanlon's mill, what were once a proud place with a water wheel what turned and sang all day. But the mill were long gone to ruin, and now it stood as dead as stone. The trees had grown thick around it and twisted round the old sagging building, and the stream there had turned shy, whispering instead along back routes hidden from view. The place had been derelict for years. Today, though, as Mick passed, he thought he heard the creak of the old wheel turning, slow and steady as though water still flowed beneath it. He stopped the cart and he looked. The great old wheel, black with age, was all covered over with moss and ferns, and the bushes were all hanging down about it. There it stood, completely motionless. And yet, hear it he could. There was no mistaking it, for now he could hear voices too. The mill sounded as busy as surely it must have done in the days when the mill was in full use. But noisome as it was, nothing could be seen to stir an inch that day. This unnerved Mick greatly, and so he hurried along to Connolly's, crossing the rest of the Inch without incident. At last he reached his destination and loaded the iron latch into the cart, and after a brief rest set off on the return journey. He were not looking forward to it. The strange goings-on at Hanlon's mill were surely an ill omen, and he was most displeased at having to pass by it once more. Worse still, he guessed now that right around the time he would pass it again, the sun would be going down, or maybe gone from the sky altogether. And right he was. He reached Hanlon's mill again in the gloaming. The sun had set and the road was dark, though the sky still held its colour. It was not day, and it was not night, and Mick grew worried, for he had heard stories of the Inch, that it was not a place, not a here nor a there, but somewhere in between the two. It would not do to linger in a place that was not really a place, in a time that was not really a time. He rode quietly, nervously past the mill, his wide eyes watching, his ears straining for the slightest sound. The mill, to his great relief, was as still and silent as it should be. Indeed, the whole place was quiet. Uncannily so. So much so that he found he was holding his breath. His horse was nervous too, pricking up her ears, flaring her nostrils, tucking her tail close. And then he heard the faint, soft chime of tinkling bells. No sooner had he heard the sound than a great shadow passed over him. He turned to look. A black coach was passing silently by, drawn by 6 black horses, each galloping along without making a sound. Mick looked upon them with horror, for each of the horses were headless, though they didn't seem to notice themselves. He then beheld the driver, who held the reins high. He were headless too, keeping his own grinning skull tucked beneath one arm, its hollow sockets burning into the darkling night. The driver struck the horses with his whip, though again no noise could be heard, and off they sped, passing Mick without a word, without a look, without slowing, and soon they were lost among the trees. Well, Mick's heart almost died within him from fright, and the rest of his journey was an extremely nervous one. By the time he reached the master's house, the moon was up and the wind had risen. The gate hung open, and the horse refused to move further. Mick looked up and immediately saw why. Parked in the drive, still and silent as stone, was the same black coach. Mick stepped towards it, but in an instant it vanished, melted into the air like smoke through his fingers. A moment later, from inside the house, there came a scream. The master, who only that morning had been in fine health, was dead. There was not a mark upon him, no wound, no sickness, no cause of death could be found. He'd simply stopped. Mick learned quickly not to speak of what he saw that night, for few believed him, and they mocked him mercilessly. Never again did he take the old road across the Inch. Never again would he pass by Hanlon's mill.
Now, those of you who are familiar with this Croft and Croker story will know that I've made significant changes to Hanlon's Mill, which I can discuss in a separate video for anyone who's interested. The thematics and the symbolism are the same, the result is the same. I've just tidied it up a bit and shaped the storytelling style into something that actually works for a modern audience. If you do want to go read the original, the link is in the description. Much of Croft and Croker's work is public domain now, so you can read it completely free. What I hoped you would notice is that in this version, as in the original, the word Dullahan is conspicuous by its absence. The question is, was that really the Dullahan at all? Or have we mistaken him for something else entirely? In Hanlon's Mill, we certainly find the Cóiste Bodhar, or silent coach, which comes for the master, appearing at a liminal space in a liminal time, symbolically representing the transition from life to death. And yet, curiously, the rider's not referred to as the Dullahan at all. This is consistent with Cóiste Bodhar tales, in which riders are often anonymous phantoms. The original tale describes the encounter thus. A great high black coach drawn by 6 black horses, with long black tails reaching almost down to the ground, and a coachman dressed all in black, sitting up on the box. But what surprised Mick the most was that he could see no sign of a head either upon coachman or horses. It's an uncanny encounter, but is it truly with the Dullahan, or have we collapsed 2 distinct traditions into one? The reason I ask this is because all 4 tales in Croker's Dullahan chapter present notably different beings in terms of both character and purpose. Some are collectors of souls, others are not. The Cóiste Bodhar, which shares a strong thematic connection to death as well as aesthetic similarities with the Dullahan, is clearly closely related, but not necessarily the same thing. In the tale of the Headless Horseman, which we'll tell in full in a separate tale next week, the Dullahan's role as a psychopomp is utterly diminished. Here he's depicted instead as a mournful spirit, unable to move past the tragic circumstances of his own death. No souls are collected, no one in the story dies. He may form a warning, perhaps, but he's certainly not a reaper. And in the tale of the Good Woman, also appearing in the exact same collection, the Dullahan is described very differently indeed. The tale takes place in a valley, another sort of in-between place, through which a man named Larry Dodd rides home at twilight, mounted on a horse, he'd just bought at a fair. Somewhere along the dark, quiet road, he notices a woman walking briskly ahead. He rides up beside her and greets her. She says nothing. Her hood is drawn, concealing every aspect of her face. Thinking her shy, Larry offers her a ride. She accepts without a word, slips onto the horse just behind him, putting one arm around his waist. For a time they ride in silence, but as they reach a lonesome stretch of road near a dark pool, Larry's horse suddenly stops. Concerned about a loose shoe, Larry dismounts, but the moment his feet hit the floor, the woman leaps off the back of the horse and runs swiftly and silently towards the ruins of an old ivy-covered church. Now, Larry, who's not the best decision-maker in the world, pursues her. She crosses the graveyard with uncanny ease, while he stumbles along behind her, trudging through tall grasses and overgrown brambles, and failing to notice the increasing number of bones strewn all over the floor about him. Round and round the ruins she runs, until finally Larry catches up to her, leaps forward, and grabs her in his arms. It's then that he turns her around, gazes deep into the darkness beneath her hood, and there, to his horror, discovers that she has no head. It's at that moment that, from within the ruin, strange lights flicker on. Bells chime softly, and Larry spies a dreadful scene. A grotesque circle of the dead, headless men and women, priests, publicans, soldiers, all of them dancing around a wheel adorned with skulls. Bones clatter in the merry din. A goblet is passed around, and one of the Dullahans turns to Larry and offers him a drink. The others all chant for him to join them in raising a cup. In his confusion and delirium, Larry accepts, and in that moment he feels his own head fall away. What followed he could not clearly recall, only the din of the dance, the chiming of the bells, and the terrible joy of those who'd lost their heads. When he awoke, it was morning. His head was once more his own and upon his shoulders. The ruined church was empty, and the horse that he'd only bought the evening before was gone. He returns home battered, bewildered, and broke. His wife, furious at his disappearance and also the loss of the horse, demands an explanation. And so, foolishly, he tells her the truth, or at least what he remembers of it, which, as you can imagine, doesn't go down well at all. Larry, we are told, is severely scolded by his already extremely angry wife. Now, what's curious about this story is that despite the markedly different aesthetics, the woman Larry picks up along the road is described explicitly as a Dullahan, with the text noting how Larry is horrified at the conviction that he had actually held a Dullahan in his embrace. The first thing we should notice is the use of the indefinite article a Dullahan, which should alone be enough to dispel the modern idea of a single specific entity known by that name. The Dullahan is an entirely modern misreading. This is a state of being, not a character. But more to the point, the principal Dullahan in this story is not a rider. She drives no coach, and, crucially, she does not collect Larry's soul. Indeed, everyone in the tale survives. Larry's decapitation is not permanent, but symbolic. A mock death endured at a mock wake. The Dullahan there are gathered not to hunt or to punish, but to party. A grotesque satire of life's end, in which class and station are meaningless and all are equal in their headless anonymity. Death clearly plays a role in the story, but in a strange, blackly comic sort of way, very different from what we see in Hanlon's mill. Taken together, the Good Woman and the Headless Horseman both show a Dullahan who exists outside the role of a reaper, which is more closely aligned with the Cóiste Bodhar myth, and suggests that these myths were once indeed entirely separate, even if they share an aesthetic, and that they have since been fused together. So, what happened? How did such varied and unsettling tales collapse into the single terrifying image of the soul-collecting rider that we know today? Well, as Croft and Croker and other Victorian collectors retold these stories, it's possible that distinctions blurred, and over time the striking imagery won out over ambiguity. What preceded these printed stories were the oral traditions, which began to ossify under literary framing. The Dullahan became a single simplified symbol, the Headless Reaper. This is both the wonder and the frustration of folklore. In oral tradition, stories are not stable. They are reshaped with every retelling, refitted to the fears and fascinations of each new teller and each new audience. It's only when we start to write them down, to label them, that they begin to fix into place. Regular viewers of the channel will know this problem well. Across Celtic folklore especially, written records come very late in the day. Even the oldest texts trail far behind the origins of the myths themselves. And yet, if we don't write these stories down, then there's a very high chance that the tales could simply be forgotten forever, which would be a terrible shame. So much of Celtic folklore has been lost in this way, and today we've very little to go on. But the effect of a dominant literary version drowning out the nuances of the many older tales is that what survives is a mere fragment, what someone, somewhere, thought worth recording at the time. As such, folkloric beings that began as complex or contradictory figures are often distilled into symbolic roles. This may have been true of the Dullahan, being a visually striking and conceptually eerie figure, now culturally tidied into a role we can grasp, the bringer of death. The Dullahan, it seems, may once have been many things, some frightening, some absurd, some even mocking. But all of them speak to liminality, to strangeness, to something not quite of this world. But if he's not truly an agent of death, then we must ask again, more carefully, what is he really? Despite the modern insistence that the Dullahan is only a collector of souls, the evidence suggests otherwise. Far from being a mere reaper, the Dullahan is a symbol of death as it truly feels to us. Silent, sudden, terrifying, and impossible to argue with. The most consistent aspect of the Dullahan myth is, of course, its headlessness, a trait which emphasises the callous, unthinking, impersonal nature of death. There's something profoundly disturbing about the severing of head from body. Here, it also suggests a fracture on a spiritual, personal level. This might relate to older Celtic conceptions of the head as the seat of the soul, seen in head cults and in warrior trophies. A being without a head is either beyond humanity or has lost what once made it human. Equally consistent is the Dullahan's liminality. Whether riding alone or driving the Cóiste Bodhar, the Dullahan always appears at the thresholds, somewhere between this place and that, sometime between day and night, and always between life and death. Sometimes he brings death, sometimes he simply confirms it, but wherever he is, we know death is not very far behind. Unlike the Banshee, who mourns for the dead with her keening, the Dullahan, crucially, is expressionless. Indifferent. He neither punishes nor protects. He shows no mercy and no malice, only inevitability. He's not simply a coachman of the dead, but a personification of everything that can't be reasoned with. Sudden death, cosmic indifference, things that have haunted our ancestors for centuries and continue to haunt us today. In this light, he becomes something broader, more mythic, a symbol, dark and indistinct, unreasonable and unknowable, a shape in the mist that reminds us death is not always meaningful or even personal. Sometimes it just is. That the Dullahan myth later fused with the psychopompic Cóiste Bodhar is likely due to the influence of 19th century revivalist collectors like Croft and Croker and Yeats. These folklorists often reshaped tales to suit romantic ideals or symbolic frameworks. Modern media only cemented the merger. The Headless Horseman trope, especially post-Washington Irving, compressed centuries of nuance into a single, more simplified Hollywood-style image that merged all headless figures into one fearsome deathbringer. Thank you, Sleepy Hollow. But when we peel back those layers, we find something older, something stranger than the Reaper. Despite the many changes over the years, a couple of things remain consistent, not just in his headlessness, but in his unnatural presence and in the liminal ground that he haunts. The role of psychopomp may be a later invention, but the emotional truth of the Dullahan has always been the same: disruption, dread, and the quiet terror of something that cannot be stopped or understood. Taken together, these stories offer no comfort, no grand meaning, only the sense that death is inevitable, and yet rarely what we expect. The Dullahan does not punish. He doesn't warn. He doesn't even look you in the eye. He simply appears, silently. He is the breath before the scream, the quiet before the storm. He's not the Reaper, but a dark herald of finality, reminding us that something greater, something darker, fiercer, and perhaps most unsettlingly of all, something wholly indifferent, is always nearby, lurking at the edges of our lives.